When I thought about the idea of bringing back a podcast, because I used to have one back in 2020, I was really like, what can I talk about? Like, I've been interviewing people for a long time, so I know how to interview people. I enjoy talking to people. And I enjoy podcasting. Like, there's no doubt about it. I enjoy doing all this. But naturally, anytime somebody starts a podcast, it's always like, the market is saturated. And yes, there's a billion episodes out there, which is totally fine. But I also thought, like, I gotta make it different. I love talking about parenting. I love talking about sports. So I came up with Courtside Forever, in part because I was thinking, I don't know, maybe there's some people out there who love parenting and love sports, and how can I combine the two? It seemed a little niche, but I don't know, that's what I'm into. And then I came across Jen Cohen Crompton, and she has a podcast called Say It in Sports, which is all about life and leadership lessons through the lens of the games that we love, which is sports. And I just thought it was such a cool opportunity. So I asked her to come on the podcast, and Jen was kind enough to say yes. So that is today's episode. We just recorded, and I really think you're going to love it. Not I think, I know you're going to, because she's great. You know, we certainly talk about her podcast, but we talk about her parenting style and everything related to lessons for her kid. We talk about, she used to have a gym with her husband, and she ran spin class, and just learning about how she ran spin class and some of the boxing classes. It was so cool. We talk about her books. We talk about her digital marketing. Jen is the real deal. So I'm excited to bring you this conversation. So I don't know, you probably had enough of me. We have a great conversation, so let's just dive into it. Thank you for being here for another episode of Courtside Forever, because as parents, we've got the best seats in the house. Let's enjoy. All right, today I am excited to talk to our guest, Jen Crompton, an entrepreneur, an author, a coach, a host of the podcast Say It in Sports, which is such a good name. I love it. She's a wife, a mom, and I'm honored to have her as a guest on Courtside Forever. So Jen, how are you today?
I am great. And thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Of course. This is literally perfect because it's a podcast about sports and parents, and you are very heavily involved in both areas. So I was thrilled to chat with you for a number of reasons. And, one of the things, of course, podcasting in February 25, so this year, you released the first episode of your podcast, Say It in Sports, where your first episode was all about toxic teammates. I think anybody in sports, we've all had a couple or some.
Right.
But you've also recorded episodes on confidence, on motivation. And what I really love, especially for a Philly sports fan like yourself, is learning to love the process, which hopefully all Philly sports fans kind of get where that's going. But ultimately, my question for you is, what prompted you to start a sports-themed podcast?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for asking. I had the idea to start a podcast for quite a while. It was something that I just kept going back to, and I kept telling my husband, I want to start a podcast, but I don't know what it's about, and I want to wait until I know what type of podcast. I want to know what the topic is and how I want to position it. So when November came around and things happened in the world that were a little bit crazy, one of the things that I thought was very interesting was, so there's two parts of this. The first one is that people weren't as educated as they could have been. And there are lots of reasons for that, and we don't have to get into that. But one thing that I thought was so interesting was that I was listening to, and I can't even remember what it was, but it was some sort of podcast or news story. And the person who was speaking was explaining parts of the government through sports analogies. And I absolutely loved it because they were first talking about, the vice president. So they said, and this is any vice president, I'm not being specific about it, but they were basically saying a vice president can be similar to a backup quarterback. And so the question was, how many backup quarterbacks do you know? And how much about their accomplishments do you know? And meaning like in the NFL, not necessarily in their past career, it's how much do you know about what they are doing currently on teams? And I was like, wow, that's such an interesting way to put it, because when you're talking about the vice president, how many people do know what the vice president does and what their role is,
Yeah, it's so true.
And so he started talking about how the vice president is someone who has to be ready to go into the game at any moment. So the backup quarterback has to be ready to go into the game at any moment. So very similarly, the vice president knows all of the things, has to know all of the things, and has to be ready to step in if something were to happen to the president. So that kind of led me to thinking about, I'm a communications person, and I was thinking about how we can have better conversations. And part of that led into the idea of sports and community. So my husband and I previously owned a fitness studio, and the best part of owning the studio and the reason why we did it was to build a community. And we had that community starting in 2016, and it went through to 2020. And so there were some pivotal things that happened in the world during that time. And what we found was our community is what kept us going and what kept other people going. Because even when it was COVID and we couldn't, have people come into our fitness studio, we hosted outdoor workouts. And that was just to give people a sense of normalcy. We did online workouts. We just tried to keep people together. So all of that long-winded story to tell you that I was thinking about it and I said, you know what? I love sports, but I am not like the person that knows every stat about every player. That's just not how I fan, right? That's not how I watch games. But I love the backstories of the players. I love the sense of community, the sense of camaraderie within teams. And that's really what I wanted to highlight. And part of that, I just had a guest a couple episodes ago, and she said something that I keep repeating, but it's women fan differently. And I was like, yeah, that's such a good way to put it, because we do, and it's not saying that some women don't fan like men. Like, it's not really a gender thing per se, but it kind of is. Women, we love the stories. We love the things that aren't necessarily happening at the game, but happen behind the scenes. So that was why I started the podcast. Was I said, being from Philly and having Philly teams that we just, we're diehards, as everyone knows in the world, that Philly fans are something else. We just love the sport, and we love the stories, and we love our players, and we just so passionately love them. So that was why I started it, and it's been so great so far. I've met some incredible people. We've had great conversations, and a lot of our conversations do end up going into kids in sports, because, a lot of us have kids that are playing sports right now, and we're seeing that there are some issues, but there's some amazing things that are happening. And also with women's sports and with all of the new leagues that are launching, I really do think that this is a great time too, because when people are struggling or when they are having trouble understanding what's happening in the world, you can always go back to sports. Sports they are what they are. And even if your team is playing a team that you hate, you can appreciate the game, right? You can appreciate a great play.
Always.
We can all say that Saquon Barkley's backwards jump was incredible, right? You don't have to love him, but you can say that that was an incredible, incredible play.
No, I gotta say, Jen, as a New York Giants fan, that
did
reference,
I break your heart?
it hurt my heart a little bit, but I gotta say, the Giants have been so poorly managed for so long that honestly, I was happy to see him go elsewhere. I felt like the Giants really mismanaged him. And while initially I was like, he had to go he had to go to Philly. I honestly, I have to say, I was very happy to see him get a Super Bowl ring, because he was such a professional. He was so great in New York. So thank you, Philly, for taking care of our guy. Well, it's not our guy. He probably wouldn't claim us anymore, but that's okay. We're a mess right now.
I always say every opportunity plays a role, right? So he had to go to the Giants first. That's what had to happen. And then he had to come to Philly. So it was all part of his journey, all part of his success. And in a podcast I recorded yesterday, we were just talking about how the environment helped him reach his potential, right?
Yes.
But he had to take stepping stones to get there. So had he joined the Eagles team a few years ago, maybe it wasn't going to be the same environment. Maybe he wasn't going to reach his potential. But
for sure.
Lucky for us and lucky for him, everything fell into place, and he helped us bring home that ring. So.
Oh, absolutely. I know you're hitting on so much, and I'm such a fan of your podcast and just kind of like the analogy behind it, because even this little bit of a deep cut for NBA fans and Philly fans, but like Quentin Grimes, who finished his season with the 76ers, I think in his career, he bounced around. He was like in New York and then maybe Toronto, then I think Dallas, and then got cut or traded and ended up in Philly. And then a couple of injuries happened, and he had a phenomenal end to the season. And people are like, wow, this Quentin Grimes. It's like, no, he needed the right environment in
Yeah.
order to thrive. And Philly obviously was that place. So I'm super happy for him as a person. And now your podcast, obviously you've done a number of episodes, so let me ask, what's something that you've learned about sports or even yourself that you didn't necessarily know before you launched in February?
Oh boy. Well, I think one of the things is that sports does more than I anticipated. So I knew
Yeah.
that sports was something that brings people together. It's something
Hmm.
that, gives people the opportunity to talk about something that they're passionate about and bond over it, which I think is amazing. But I did not realize how many people met their significant others from sports,
Ah. Oh, I
which I
love
think is
that.
awesome, right? And even when I was hearing a story yesterday about one of my guests who spotted her husband in a bar and he was wearing an Eagles jersey, and that's how they got together in the first place. I thought back
Yep.
to the fact that my husband and I also met in a bar. I was wearing an Eagles jersey, and it was after an Eagles game that he had been to, and then he went to the bar afterward. So I was like, wow, how about that? You really think about how
Yeah.
sports unites you like in a different way. Like, did not think that after that Eagles game when I was watching it at a bar, hanging out with friends, that I was going to meet my husband.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And here you are building a life together. I know sports it really does bring people together. And especially, right now it's incredibly needed. Like you're in a stadium and there's something so collective about seeing that team jersey on somebody else. And, whether you're wearing a Phillies hat and kind of being out like at a grocery store or wherever, like it is fun to have that collection, like I don't know, the nucleus of conversation that can then branch out to other things. Like obviously, you and your
Yeah.
husband, which I'm excited to dive into that story. But obviously there was a connection of sports right there. And again, you're building a life on that. So, which I love. Now you are an athlete, and I believe with your gym that you had, like, did you teach boxing classes? Was that accurate?
Yeah, so we had our fitness studio was boxing and cycling.
Nice.
I was a cycling instructor. Fun fact is, I think in 2007 or 8ish,
Hmm.
I did not have a job, and because I had been laid off and fired, and I don't know, I was searching for my purpose in life, I guess, right?
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
all do at some point.
Oh, for
And
sure.
but I had one very consistent thing that I had done ever since I was younger, which was, going to the gym. But then when I was in grad school, I made a deal with my dad. And I said to my dad, my dad ended up having a heart attack when I was in grad school. And I said to him, if you wake up in the morning and you wake me up, I will go to the gym with you. I'll be your gym buddy. But like, I was like, I can't get up that early. But if he wakes me up, I will definitely get up. I didn't want to wake up to my alarm at 5 a.m. So my dad and I started to get into this rhythm. And every morning we got up at 5 a.m. We went to the gym. We came home. I think I slept half the time in the car on the way there because I made him
Hmm.
drive. But
Hmm.
it was just something that we did. And so that has been very consistent in my life. So even when I didn't have a job, I still got up very early, went to the gym, and then I would come home and I'd make, finding a job my full-time job for the day. I'd be looking for jobs and whatever. So
Yeah.
I just really found that, the gym was something that kept me consistent, kept me on a schedule, kept my mood up. And I would go in the morning, and when I used to go with my dad, I saw this room that had a shut door and I was like, what is that room? So I look in and I see people riding a bike and I was like, wow, that looks
Mm.
interesting. So I'm like, it's really hard to run and like carry the weight of my body at 5 a.m. What if I
Yeah.
sit down and work out? That looks like a better idea, right? So I joined my first spin class and I was hooked. And I was like, this is amazing. I love it. This is, the best workout I can get. And so fast forward to when I was unemployed And I still got up, went to the gym. And then a couple mornings I showed up and there was no instructor there for the cycle class. And I was like, come on, like we can do better. I don't even have a job. And here I am like, and y'all need to show up for yourselves and for everyone else here. So what did I do? Which is what I do with everything. I was like, you know what? I could do this myself. So
There you go.
I got certified. I borrowed my dad's credit card. I got certified to be a cycle instructor. And then I taught as many classes as I possibly could. I subbed for everyone. I learned how to do it, learned what people liked. I loved, creating my playlists. And so when I was pregnant, I found that was one of the times I cycled all the way up until the day I went into labor. Like that morning.
No way.
That morning I went
No
to a
way.
cycle class. Yeah. So and the whole time, and look, by that point, I am sure that when I was an instructor, the people in my class were looking at me like, she should probably stop.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's over. And I just found too that it was very motivating for the people that came to my class. They'd be like, wow, I can't believe you're still doing this. I'm like, yeah, I'm a human, like I'm growing one, but like this is what we do. So when I came back after I had my son, I was like, you know what? I want to do more of this. I want to do more of motivating people and getting people excited about moving their body. And I want to break that stigma of, you have to be perfectly fit to go to a fitness class or whatever. So anyway, so again, I was hopped up on hormones because I just had a baby. We were very sleep deprived. And my husband and I decided to open up a fitness studio. And we opened up my son was 9 months old. So we opened up in 2015. Yeah. And it was an incredible experience, and learning boxing was so great. My husband and I did it, for fun, and I never actually boxed anyone. Trust me, I did not want to get hit in the face. But it was great to be able to do that, and also to like hold the mitts for other people. There'd be guys in there that were 200 pounds and over 6 feet, and I was holding mitts for them. And it was just such a great environment to show everyone that all of that is possible. And when I watch people pick up gloves and put them on and punch a punching bag and actually learn how to land a punch, you could just see the confidence grow in them, which I thought was incredible.
Oh, I bet. And that background is incredible. And, you and your husband, on top of having a studio and being in sports, you also competed in an Ironman competition last year. So what is it about sports and athletics in general that really resonate with you, and certainly you two as a couple?
Yeah, so I think it's really about challenging yourself, right? So as we get older, we choose different challenges because we have, the bigger the risk, the bigger the fall, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Finding positive ways to challenge yourself, I think, is very, very important. And so, I've always been interested in doing races. So I do like running races, not to win. I never win, but I do them for fun.
For sure.
And so when we had our fitness studio the one year, my husband challenged me to do a triathlon, and I swim like I'm drowning. Like people look at me and they're like, are you okay? My very first triathlon I swam in the ocean, and I had a personal lifeguard who pretty much paddled on the surfboard directly next to me because they were worried I was going to drown. I got to the end of it and I was like, never doing that again. I did one more of them. And then I really was like, I'm never doing this again. I cannot swim. But my husband last year, or a couple years ago, he did his first Ironman, and watching him train for it and watching him achieve, finish at the end, like it was a very, very emotional experience for him. Also for me to watch him do that, it was really great. And then when last year he wanted to do one, I was like, look, I definitely cannot swim. It's just not my thing. But I will do what I can. So me and a friend of mine, we did a relay. So I did the biking portion of it. And the bike was, oh gosh, how many miles do we do? Like 50 or something? 54 miles or something like that? Wait, is that right? Well, regardless, the point is this was in Maine. It was in Augusta, Maine, and there were rolling hills, right? And when you say rolling hills, you're like, okay, up and down. No, this was like hill, you got to the bottom, and there was another one, and then there was another one, and it was insane. But I finished the bike. Actually, the best part about this story is I finished the bike. I crossed the finish line of the bike portion. And as I did that, a guy next to me was uh, getting off of his bike. He was dismounting and he fell into me and then knocked me over and popped my chain. And I had like the biggest bruise on my leg. And I said, you know what? If this were to happen, this is the perfect time. I just crossed the finish line. Like, okay. But the Ironman was an emotional experience, even though I only did the I'm sorry, not the swim portion, the bike portion of it. It's just an incredible thing to finish and to say, wow, I did that. I had a lot of conversations in my head over that time. And I remember being like, telling yourself, you got to do this, you can get through it. You just have a lot of time in your own head, but in the best of ways, because you are challenged the entire time. So I think just being able to challenge ourselves in such a great way, taking on these fitness challenges that we do, is great. And it's great for our relationship because we do it together and we really do cheer each other on. And I said to my husband after that Ironman, I was like, look, if you didn't say to me, you can do this, because I had no idea. I'm like, look, the furthest I've ever biked was 10 miles during the triathlon. So I was like, if you didn't tell me I could do it, I would have just assumed I couldn't. And he was like, no, you got this. So it was great. And we're actually going to do another one this summer, but I'm still not swimming. I can't. It's just not my thing. Can't swim.
Is it going to be in Maine as well?
No, this one's going to be in New York. I'm never doing the Maine Ironman ever again. Never.
Those rolling hills, can't do them.
They were something else. That was the most challenging thing I've ever done physically, ever.
Now, on top of your work with a podcast and everything that you've done, you've also taught college-level digital marketing courses for quite some time, as far as what I can see. And now, I know there's a lot of parents who are dealing with layoffs. We obviously talked about that a little bit. And there's a lot of uncertainty. So looking at the landscape of digital marketing, what are a few of the lesser-known areas that you feel the people, especially parents, maybe should know about within that industry?
Yeah. So I think one of the great things that is happening is that kids are, I mean, it's good and bad, but I look at the good part of it, which is that kids are growing up as those digital natives, right? So they understand how a lot of this stuff works online. And I've been working in the space for a while. I mean, I started on Twitter back when Twitter was like fun.
Yes. I know. Those are fun. Those are fun times. Like the early days of Twitter, like it was really, I don't know if I'd say magical, but like it was really enjoyable. You got authentic voices. You'd interact with celebrities and it was like them, not their publicists. Like it was a fun time.
It was. And it kind of reminds me of how Threads is right now. So I'm like, please don't come in and ruin that because,
I know.
I don't want people to take it away from us. But Twitter was so great. And, watching this industry evolve has been very interesting. And I think now what I love is like bonding with my son over it. And I think that parents, you have to be careful with letting your kids have free reign of the internet, right? We can't do that. That's just, it's probably worse than just like letting your kid roam your neighborhood. Like there are more dangers letting a kid roam on the internet than going outside and going to their friend's house and playing. But there is a lot of benefits for people to learn some of the digital tools. And I almost like hesitant to talk about this because I feel like it's so played out. But AI really is a great tool if you use it the right way, right?
Yes.
And my son is learning how to do things on like Canva. He's learning how to use ChatGPT. But I'm trying to teach him the safety of it, teaching him how to use it responsibly. But also, I can't prevent him from using it. He's going to use it. He's going to encounter it. So it's how can I educate myself to make sure I'm educating him? And in that, we're both learning it together and it's helping my career and it's also helping him. And I hope that it helps him in the future because I do think that, schools are going to require some sort of AI, education and just, learning some of those tools that I think can help him express his creativity. So like he'll go into Canva and he makes like fake sports cards and he makes backgrounds for phones, and does all of these creative things, which I very much appreciate and just think it is such a good thing for him to be able to express himself and to be able to understand some of these tools that maybe, other people aren't understanding yet or whatever, to maybe give him an advantage when he decides what he wants to do with his life. But who knows? He's 10.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, honestly, like I mean, I'm still figuring things out. Like my daughters are asking me the other day, like, what did you want to do? What did you want to be as a kid? And I told them, I was like, oh, I want to be like a sports broadcaster and kind of work in sports and talk to people. And it was really cute because I in my head I'm thinking like, oh, I never got to do that. And then they were kind of like, well, you're kind of doing that with your podcast. And I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? I think I am. So like even I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we're still figuring things out. So I love the fact that your son is, my kids are, and quite frankly, to your point, we're heading into a world where there are going to be more digital tools. It's just the way it is. I know I grew up like that whole like mindset of I went out in the morning, especially in the summer times, rode my bike around town, went to different places. I came home at nighttime. Like,
Yeah.
yes, like, was it great? I personally enjoyed it, but like it's not the world that we're in. So how do we kind of prep them? And I know with you and your expertise in digital marketing, I know that you probably have, I guess, insight into that world that a lot of people don't, which is why, I really want to get your thoughts on that. So I appreciate that. Now, you're also, in terms of digital marketing, you also wrote a book called Fueling Your Best, a 90-Day Challenge. Now, this book also has a sister book, which is a children's book titled Fuel Your Best, which I absolutely love. So what went into the creation of creating both of these kind of together, but also separate books?
Yeah. So the first one, the kids' book, I did that during the pandemic, and
Mm,
it was inspired by my son because
yeah.
we were talking about how like the book's theme is movement and inclusivity,
Uh-huh.
and I was part of what we did at the fitness studio was to try to encourage families to be fit. And it
Mm.
wasn't like families have to go out and do all these challenges or be as crazy as me and my husband, right? You don't have to do that. But what you can do is you can just get your kids outside and have a catch, do something movement, teach them how to move from a very early age. I would say that the other day I had a great parenting win where my son, he's like, Mommy, is it okay if I put my headphones on and I go for a run up the street and around the block? And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's what I did when I was 10. And I'm like, I didn't say this to him because then he would be like, I'm not doing it. But
Yeah.
he's like, can I just go for a run? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then when I was talking to my husband about it, I said, that's because he's mirroring our behaviors. Like he looks up to us. That's a learned behavior. He knows that
Yeah.
we'll go out for a run. So the whole idea of that book was just to really inspire families to, encourage their kids to get involved and to see what the benefits are of being a part of a team or even just moving again, being outside, being physical in some sense. And
Yeah.
so that was a little bit of a pandemic project, but very fun to do and very fun to speak about it. I went to a couple different schools, read the book, did some stuff like that. And I've always enjoyed working with children. So that was really great to kind of fulfill that mission. And then the Fueling Your Best workbook, which is a 90-day challenge, actually came out of the fitness studio. So when we had our fitness studio, we launched, I think, 3 different challenges. They were each 90 days. And the whole
Mm,
concept of it was I came up with 5 categories, which are live, give, laugh, sweat, and fuel. And so
nice.
each of those categories, there were a series of things that you could do that would help you improve your life. So the whole idea is that we make small incremental changes on a consistent basis that can lead us to being completely different in the end. So if you take
Mhm.
90 days and every day you do something for 90 days, a small thing, doesn't have to be big. One day it might be go for a walk. The next one might be write a letter to someone. The next one might be call someone on the telephone, right? So things that we don't always do, but if we challenge ourselves to do them, they can make a big difference in our lives. And
Yeah.
that was the whole idea of it. And I really wanted to. So when I did it at the fitness studio, I made a workbook. I stapled it. I printed it. I, made all these homemade things. And then I had a couple of people who said, this is really cool. You should make it a little bit bigger. So I worked on the workbook, and I had that published in 2023, I think at the end of the
Oh,
year. Yeah. And that was really fun. And again, it was, more because I wanted to just give people some tools and things that they could do that can help them be their best. And, again, it's not like I'm telling you need to go run a marathon, but I did put in there things like, sign up for a race. It could be any race. It could be walking. It could be a 5K. But the
yeah.
idea is, we don't learn about ourselves until we try something new. And that's what
Yeah.
I wanted people to do.
I love it. I love it. I cannot wait to try your 90-day challenge myself. I'm feeling, I don't know, it might be a good kind of spring going into summertime activity. So definitely going to link this in here and definitely going to add it to my bookshelf. So I certainly appreciate that. Now, in addition to the titles that we've talked about, we've obviously kind of touched on motherhood, but I certainly would love to get into parenting as well. And just once we got connected, I really love how you and your family show up at games together. Honestly, it all looks like a blast. I know you're a big Philly sports fan, which is so cool. Clearly, he sees a motivated mom and a motivated dad as well, who are building really something special. So for you, like, what are you trying to teach him about sports, about business, and about life in general?
Yeah. So what a big question. I love it. So when it comes to sports, I grew up going to Phillies games. That's what we did as a family. That was something that all of us, so I have a sister, my mom, my dad, we lived together. So growing up, that was something that all four of us really enjoyed. So it
Yeah.
wasn't, just one of us wanted to go or whatever. That's what we did. That was like all summer long. We went to Phillies games. It was normal.
Hmm.
And I really enjoyed it. It was a great way for me to, bond with my parents, to sit with my dad, to talk about the game. And I just always felt that sports really was that link that just brought us all together. So again, we could have been doing all different things on our own, but then we'd all sit down to watch the Phillies game together.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to bring that to my son. And it's a good way to also loop in my parents and to have time
Mm.
for my son to spend with his grandparents. Fun fact too is that a couple years ago, we bought my in-laws tickets to the Phillies, like a 6-pack or so for the summer. And
Yeah.
my father-in-law was never a really big baseball fan until he started going to the games because we bought him the tickets.
I love
So
that.
so it's great because then when we're spending time with them, we always put the game on, and it brings us together as a family. So I've always looked at sports as, not just about competition and playing sports, but also about how it brings people together and how it becomes a family affair. I played sports. I played soccer growing up. I played all the way up until I was pregnant with my son.
Oh,
And
cool.
my family showed up for all of my games. Like, no matter where the game was, in college, my sister would show up. And I enjoyed the competitiveness. I enjoyed being a leader. I learned so much from playing soccer. Life skills, not just about the sport. I mean, look, I probably learned more about life from soccer than I did about the actual rules of soccer, to be perfectly
Uh-huh.
honest.
Oh, yeah.
And I just loved it. So when we had my son, I was hoping that he'd be athletic. I was like, I don't know, who knows? And maybe he's
You
not.
never
And
know.
right. And maybe he'll teach me something else and he won't be athletic, whatever. So we kind of like let that naturally unravel. And lucky for us, he is a very athletic kid, but he also loves sports. And
Yeah.
so he plays sports, which is great. And I'll tell you a quick story about him in a second about baseball. But he also plays video games, but the only video games he plays are sports. This
Mm.
kid can give you every stat about every player. Like he
Yep.
plays MLB The Show. He plays, I don't even know what the other ones are called, but like he plays the basketball
Yeah.
game. He plays Madden, so
Yep.
he knows all of these stats. But what I've watched him do is learn situational plays from playing video games and then taking them to the field, which I
Oh,
think
that's
is
good.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
His like knowledge of baseball and which play to make when has been incredible. Like, I mean, he's smarter than I am when it comes to the sport at this point. He'll tell me, he's like, oh, well, I threw it there because, I had to get that player out so that way the runners didn't advance, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow,
That's
good
so
for you,
good.
bud, right?
Yeah.
So my fun story about him real quick is that a couple years ago, so this is third year playing baseball. 2 years ago when he started his first year, he played in a league. He did not get a hit the entire season.
Okay.
He didn't hit. He was last in the lineup. As a parent, I watched that. So
Yeah.
you can understand. I was not very
I
happy
do.
that he was always last in the lineup. I was a little bothered by that, but I was like,
Understandable.
I'm going to let the coach, and I'm not going to express disappointment. Like, I'm going to let my son, if he's not disappointed, I'm not going to point this out to him. Like, he will just keep going.
Yeah.
So, we finished out the season. He did the best he could. The following season, he asked me if he could play. I said, are you sure you want to play? He's like, yeah. So my rule is I ask him 3 times in 3 different situations. And if each time he says yes, then I say, okay, he must be serious.
Yeah.
So I asked him 3 times. He said yes, he played. Last year, he was such a great player. He wasn't the all-star on the team, but he hit, he could field, and that was all because in the off season he practiced because he
Yeah.
wanted to get better. And I was so surprised that he even wanted to play because I would have been like, no, thank you. I was no good.
Yep.
Why would I want to play again? Like, that doesn't make, like my swimming story, but I'm not a good swimmer. We cannot do that. But
Yeah, fair enough.
this year, his baseball team, he ended up being on a team with no kids that he knew. He didn't know a single person on the team. At first, as a parent, I thought, well, should I ask if he could be on a different team so he at least has a buddy? And I thought, you know what? No. Like, we don't always get to choose our situations, right? And we can't make our kids comfortable all the time because they're not going to learn that way. They need some adversity. They need some friction. And he needs to navigate the situation. And he'll figure it out. He's a smart kid. He's, sociable. He'll be fine. This team so far has been my absolute favorite team that he's been on. And he is thriving. And he's doing great. And he doesn't know any kid. He didn't know any kid on the team, But this team has really great coaches, really great kids, and I'm sure great parents as well. And the kids are so respectful of each other. They're mindful of each other. The coaches are encouraging, and it's just been great to watch. So I think, I have a rule for my son, which if you ask him, he'll ask you if he can say it, because my mantra that he has to live by, this is what I tell him all the time, is you cannot be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. That is all I tell him. I said, you have one job in this world, and it is to not be an asshole. And I have a job, and it's to make sure that you're not an asshole. And that's it. That's all we have to do, right? Like, think about it.
I love that.
You don't want your kid to be a bully. Well, that's an asshole. So don't be an asshole, So it applies to everything. But I try to teach him how to be a good teammate. And essentially, I'm like, go back to your guiding principle. Don't be an asshole. So, like, are you a good teammate? Are you shaking their hands? Are you congratulating them? So I say to my husband often that, we can't shield our kids, but what we need to do, what our job is to teach them how to make good decisions. And that is by giving them guiding principles and morals and values. And so the way that I parent, I definitely think all of that can be learned through sports. And that is why I am so adamant about him playing it, watching it, and for us being involved in it. And by no means am I ever forcing him to do anything. If he doesn't want to be interested, that's okay too. But luckily he has been interested. So, we went to London last year to watch the Phillies play. We just went down to DC to go to a different stadium to watch the Phillies. So, it ends up being even more than that because we're traveling and experiencing life and doing those things. So it all roads lead back to sports in my world.
They do. And I know you care so deeply about kindness in sports, which, I do too. And I heard a lot of it in this story. So youth sports, especially right now, are getting a bad rap. And a lot of it is honestly pretty justifiable. So what advice do you have for parents who want to build a kinder sports environment for their kids?
Yeah. So I think one thing is, lead by example, right? So, you don't agree with the coach. Okay, fine. Do not get in the car and tell your kid that their coach is terrible. Regardless of what your personal view is, it is not your job to share that with your child, right? Your child has a completely different perspective than what you have. And there's so many reasons for that, So when we didn't necessarily agree with our son's coach at one point, I just said I have to take a step back, right? I just have to take a step back. And I always ask the question, is my child being hurt? Is my child upset? And is it something that is going to impact them in the future? And if any of those questions or any of those answers are yes, then it might be a time for me to step in. But if it's more like something that I know that he just needs to handle on his own, or I just need to give him the tools to handle it, then I let it go. And sometimes it's hard. It's not easy to do, but it is in my head, it's necessary because I can't shield him from being in uncomfortable positions. I need to teach him how to navigate them. So I think for parents, it's lead by example for sure. So be the parent you want other parents to be. And the other part of it is, I think, having conversations and communicating. So if a coach is doing something that, you're not happy with, have a conversation with the coach, but make it a two-way conversation, right? Listen first. So if there is an issue, maybe you ask them, hey, coach, I was just wondering, why did you make that decision, for my son to sit the bench? I'm just curious, just want to know. So you're not going and being accusatory. You're not being defensive. You're really seeking to understand. It's the idea of like leading with curiosity, right? Like, I really want to know the answer to your question. I'm not going to assume anything. I just want to understand it because I might be interpreting it differently. So the fact that my kid was always last in the lineup, yes, it's because he could not bat, but I could have asked the coach and I could have approached the coach and just said, why is it? And maybe he would say like, hey, your kid's a jerk at practice and I've had enough of him and that's why he's last, Definitely not my kid. That would not be the situation. I hope. But you never know, so you can't assume. So just leading with curiosity, asking questions, like communicating, but also remembering that a lot of these coaches are volunteer coaches. And so, I always think that I can't go into a situation with a complaint unless I either have a solution or I'm willing to do something about it, right? So it's very hard. Like, you can't criticize a coach for volunteering and doing their best. They're doing their best. They volunteered, You can definitely help them with resources or, figuring out how to maybe support them. But you really can't just say, you're doing an awful job. And then I feel like the coach should just turn around and be like, well, then you do it, like I volunteered. So it does put us in a funny like catch-22 with some of these youth sports because, not all of the coaches are compensated. They're not all given the resources they need. But at the same time, they're volunteering, they're putting their time into it. So I always look at it as maybe if this season my son isn't learning all of the technical skills of the sport because the coach doesn't know all of them, well, what else is he learning? Is he learning camaraderie? Is he learning how to be a good teammate? All of the other things that factor into being a great human.
Yeah,
if he's
adversity.
Learning that, if he's learning that, then that's okay. Like, I think the best thing this season that my son's coach did was he wrote us all a message and said, welcome to the team. And in his message, he had one sentence that stood out to me. And I looked to my husband and said, I'm happy he's on this team. And the sentence was, I cannot guarantee that your kids are going to win a lot of games, but I can guarantee that they're going to have a lot of fun and they're going to learn about the sport.
Yes.
And I was like, that's all I want. That is all I want, So I think parents have to manage their expectations, remember that if your kid is 6, 5, 7, whatever, they're not getting ready for the pros right now. So it's okay if they're having fun. It's okay if they maybe don't pay attention 100% of the game, let them learn, like give them the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a great coach. I'll definitely have to implement some of that because I coach my daughter's basketball teams. And
I love that.
It's so much fun. But I always tell the parents, like in my initial group me message, just like really kind of set things off from the get-go and say, like, if any of us is bragging about our score or like our record at the end of the season, or certainly 5-10 years from the line, like I have failed as a coach.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want them to have fun because, like, again, as an adult, like, can you imagine meeting somebody in a business meeting or whatever, and they're like, hey, Jen, back in my day, my third grade team, we were undefeated. You'd be like, okay,
yeah.
well, you're definitely failing my one rule that I have for my son. I'll tell you that. So,
right.
Oh my goodness. Well, at the end of each episode, I love to ask guests a hypothetical question, really something that can only be answered by you. So I try to come up with a question that's straight for you. So now, Jen, you are a Philly sports fanatic, and I'm sure you know, kind of like we alluded to earlier, but Philly sports fans, sometimes they get a bad rap. Sometimes they're known for being a little ruthless. Santa Claus comes to mind in terms of booing him in the late 70s or early 80s. But I'm going to give you a chance to turn things around for all Philly sports fans. So,
oh boy, this sounds heavy.
It's heavy, and it's very specific. So for you, who are 4 Philly sports athletes who you would put on your kindness Mount Rushmore? Any Philly, it can be Phillies, 76ers, Eagles, it can Villanova, even like Philly sports fans who you would put on your kindness Mount Rushmore.
All right, I love this. So I'm only going to give you current players because
there we go.
There's so many players in the history of Philly sports. But so let me narrow it, or else I'll sit here forever and never give you an answer. So let's say, all right, so I'm going to put number 1 as Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts is the consummate athlete, human. He's everything, right? He's not a showy person. He is the person who donates $50,000 to the Philadelphia school system so kids can have air conditioning in their classrooms. That is the type of guy that he is, which is amazing. And I could not talk about him without mentioning that his entire management team are females, which I absolutely love as well. So so Jalen Hurts, I think, gets the primary spot on the Mount Rushmore right now.
There we go.
Other players I would include, so I would put Kyle Schwarber up there. So from the Phillies, Kyle Schwarber is he is a great, he didn't grow up in the city, but he's a great Philly guy, right? He's the guy that like you could sit down with, you could have a beer with, and you could just talk. And he is going to, when you sit down, he's going to say, "Hi, I'm Kyle Schwarber." And you're like, "Yeah, I know." And he'd be like, "Oh, you do?" He's that kind of guy. He has a Schwarber's Heroes, which is one of his foundations. And he's a great guy. So I think he has a good heart. He's always looking to give back. So he's definitely another one on there. I could not say Jason Kelsey, right? He comes up in every podcast, and for good reason. But that man is everything that Philly is. So he just, when he retired, it wasn't just the team that was sad. It was the whole city that was sad. Luckily, he's still around, but he just is that he's a culture contributor. He helped build the culture of the current Eagles team. He left quite a legacy in the best of ways, and he just really is a solid human. And I love that he has so many girls in his family, and I think it helps him. And his wife Kylie, I've not met her in person, although I hope I do one day, but she just I love that when she was interviewed, one of the things that she said was, "This is Jason, my boyfriend who happens to play football, not this is a football player." Like, she was interested in him for who he was. So I think that just speaks volumes to who they are as people. And so a fourth one, I'm just going to say this because he is just a living legend in my head right now, is going to be Mr. John Kruk, who is currently a commentator for the Phillies. He did play on the Phillies team. He's another like Mr. Philly man, because if you watch some of the old clips of him, like at spring training, where he's like, a little overweight, and he's like, "I'm a baseball player, I'm not an athlete," kind of thing, But he brings such a great energy to the games when he is commentating. He's funny. I don't even think he means to be funny half the time. He's a down-to-earth guy, and I just think what he does for the interest of fans right now listening to the games, watching the games. Him and Chris McCarthy have such a great synergy between the two of them. John Kruk's he's like the guy I want to hug. Like if I saw him out, I'd be like, can I get a hug? And I'm just going to throw one more person out there. I know you said 4 and I'm going over, but
that's okay. You're my guest. These are your rules. So let's add another one to it. Let's
give a shout to Dawn Staley, who is a Philly native. While she did not, she wasn't in any leagues here in Philly per se as a coach or a participant, but she's in the WNBA Hall of Fame. She is an incredible coach who is so emotionally intelligent and inspirational and has brought her team to the championships, and she just continues to be an incredible person. I think the one thing that sums up her personality is if you watch her and you see that she'll be coaching a game and she's wearing a full like Gucci suit or Louis Vuitton, and she looks amazing. And then she has her necklace on, which was for a girl that had cancer. And so that just like shows what type of person she is, right? Like she makes good money. She should. She wears the nice stuff, but like she has a heart of gold. And so we got to put her on there too.
That is perfect. Literally perfect. Anytime I put together these questions, I'm like, I hope this isn't like so specific that Jen's like, what? Like, how am I supposed to answer that on the spot? That
was a great question.
For Philly's response, like you nailed it out of the park. Like that was amazing. Amazing. So thank you so much. Now, Jen, where can the people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Jen Cohen Crompton, if you're interested there, or you can check out my website for my podcast, which is sayitinsports.com. And my podcast is available on all of the platforms, but if you go there, you'll be able to see it and click through and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I love it. Yeah, everything you do is going in the show notes, so anybody can find this, obviously this week and forever in the future. But Jen, I am just so grateful to be connected with you. Just from the second came across your profile, I was like, oh, Jen just seems like such an amazing person. Your family just seems so. I'm just so thrilled to be connected, and I cannot thank you enough for being a guest on Courtside Forever. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. This was amazing.
A big thank you to Jen, and thank you for being here for another episode of Courtside Forever, where our goal is to ensure that parents enjoy the best seats in the house. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend or two, and feel free to reach out with any comments or questions. I'm your host, Ryan Rucker, and I appreciate you being here. Take care.